says there are two cowboys, there's two stories. Was it December 3rd or was it December 17th? Were they out riding around or were they looking for some lost cattle? They both agreed it was snowing that day. So if you could imagine being one of those cowboys riding up to the edge somewhere around here and looking over, and voila. And that's why I encourage you to look at that image up on top to see what Cliff Palace looked like over 100 years ago. He was university educated. He was a scientist, but not an archaeologist. And so he was the first to look at these cliff dwellings and to record these cliff dwellings in a scientific manner, whether through writing. Well, I've been told by rock climbers you look for the path of least resistance. So that means you're going to boulder jump, you're going to zig, and you're going to zag. To go up or to go down. But as you can see, there are sheer cliffs in some of these locations. And what did the people do? This sandstone rock is very, very soft. And so they carved into the sandstone what the archaeologists refer to as hand and toe holds. And so therefore, using those hand and toe holds, you could either climb up or down. If you stopped at the visitor center at the entrance, you may have seen a statue there, a person with a backpack, a person like this. That statue represents an individual using the hand and toe holds. So had we lived here back in the 1200s, we all would have been rock climbers. And to many, it may seem hard or difficult, but stop and think about it for a moment. Think when we are our youngest, when we're a toddler. Think of toddlers, you know. If you're to put a ladder next to them, might they start to climb up? Many. So what is this big round thing called? A kiva, that is correct. It says so down there. Kiva C. Would a kiva have been opened or covered with a roof? Covered with a roof. And there would have been a hole in the center, and that's where the ladder would be. That's where you would go up and down. That's where the smoke from the fire would come on out. Over there, there's a small hole. It's called a ventilator. Fresh air sinks on down through the ventilator shaft, enters the kiva down through that hole there. It hits this little stone wall, which the archaeologists refer to as a deflector, which helps the air to circulate around. But I think just as importantly, it prevents the fresh air from blowing sparks around and possibly causing an accidental fire. Kivas were very important to the people. Had you visited Mesa Verde 2 or 3 generations ago, the rangers would have told you that kivas were used exclusively for ceremonial purposes and that only men would have been permitted inside. But archaeologists see things differently today, and they perceive kivas as being used for ceremonial purposes, but also for family and social gatherings too. And I mentioned how last year we went 53 days with no measurable precipitation. Well, the last day that we got precipitation was a 3-day snowstorm in late May. And during that snowstorm, we had temperatures barely above freezing, very strong winds, the snow was being blown all over the place. And I remember after work one night being back home and kind of thinking about the weather and thinking about kivas, and it kind of occurred to me that just maybe with a kiva being covered with a roof and a small fire, that maybe these might have been some of the warmest places to be on those coldest nights of the year.
So what is the winter like down here?
I'm not from around here, so I cannot answer that question. We are over 7,000 feet, so certain winter temperatures, generally speaking, get below freezing much of the time.
The center was where they got in with the ladder, and that's also where the snow got out. How difficult is it to go up and down with a fire?
My guess is you're making a small fire. So, again, it's something they would have learned to work with for 100 years or hundreds of years. It is important to keep in mind that the people who lived here lived on top of the mesas for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years. It was only in the last 100 to 150 years that some of them chose to come into the alcoves and that. So they would have been very familiar about this environment and things. And if you've had an opportunity to drive the Mesa Top Loop Drive, you will see various archaeological sites that you can stop and see. The very first house that they built as farmers, archaeologists refer to it as a pit house. And archaeologists believe that over the centuries, pit houses changed and turned into kivas.
Do they know how far back into...
It goes about 90 feet back.
So 90 feet back. Okay, and okay.
Do they make bricks at all, or is this all stone?
This is sandstone, so they carve the sandstone into bricks.
What do they use as mortar?
Dirt, water, and ash, and some clay, I believe. And that is the weak link. That's why we don't see any structures up on top, because the mortar would have weathered away, and then the bricks would have fallen on each other and turned into piles. Eventually, dirt and trees and bushes would have grown on top of them.
Is there a water seep at the back of this one, like something?
I believe so, yes. Mm-hmm.
They didn't use cisterns at all?
There believe is one cistern up at the Farview sites, but generally speaking, they did not. They learned how to use their resources. They didn't try to change it too much. And my guess is they were also very conservative with their water. One of the people who raised me, I mentioned my grandfather, who was born in 1891. I also refer to him as my Depression grandfather. And if you know anyone who lived during the Depression, you know that they did not waste anything and they saved everything. So I perceive it to be the same here. The people did not waste. The people saved everything they could. And I can only assume that they would be amazed yet disgusted with our toilets. It is getting time to